There was that person standing out there. I don't know if he was on the strip or not. The thing is that I clearly saw a shadow, or a being, or something. I really don't know how to tell him, because I saw that thing up close. I don't know exactly what it was, but it had a black tunic like that of the monks. And the worst thing was that he was looking at me fixedly. The one who seeks, finds. This is the phrase that my wife always tells me when remembering this experience. The first time I went through La Rumorosa was in the 80s. On that occasion, I was on a bus from Tijuana to Los Angeles, California. I was sitting in the front seat talking to the driver. I remember that I was very surprised to see those ravines, in which at times, it seemed that the wheels of the bus passed only a few centimeters from the edge of the road. But above all, I was shocked to see in the depths those cars, passenger trucks, and trailers that had collapsed. It is chilling to see all those scenes where dozens of tragedies happened and hundreds of people very likely lost their lives. The driver, when he saw me so surprised, began to tell me stories of ghosts that appear on that road. Women begging for ride at night, children standing on the edge of the road, strange lights that looked up at the sky, and so, each story more escalating than the previous. In each curve we grabbed, I looked to the sides to see the long line of cars that were in front of us and behind, since the traffic was slow for a trailer that was going to the front. And in the meantime, I couldn't stop thinking about how disturbing it would be to drive down that road, looking to see something paranormal. I have relatives in Mexicali and Tijuana, and years later, as an adult, I visited them 2 or 3 times a year. In those times I was going to see them in my car, so I took advantage of those trips, hoping to be lucky, so I could see something terrifying. So I spent several years out there looking for the adrenaline, until one day, I finally found it. On that occasion we were at night, as in the middle of the noisy we entered a pronounced curve, and when we left it, we saw that behind some large rocks, suddenly a very bright white light came out that crossed us on the way. I, surprised, turned drastically the steering wheel to avoid it. That light was so intense that when I passed by it, the whole car lit up inside. And when I passed it, I stopped totally to see what it was. What I really miss is that it was like a very tall person, but extremely thin. It had a shape like an inverted Y. It seemed to have very long legs and head, but without volume in his body. He walked like a very slow and clumsy compass, but with the very long stretch, it was incredible to see how he crossed the other side of the road in 2 steps. My wife and my son, scared and trembling, asked me what that was, but I was as surprised as they were and I did not know what to answer them, astonished and terrified. We could only watch as he crossed the road and moved away between the hills. The most curious thing was to see how he illuminated everything around him where he passed with that intense glow. When we lost sight of him, everything was in complete darkness. We could only look at each other with our skin iridescent and a confused look. In the end, we had nothing left but to follow our path. We talked about it, but no one could give an explanation about what we saw. After that experience, my worry and curiosity grew. I really wanted to meet that thing again. I wanted to know what it was. And that adrenaline sensation honestly pleased me, so I tried to travel more often there, although my wife didn't really agree with that, but since it was the path we took to go visit her sister, she had no choice but to accept. And I, with the pretext of spending all night there, invented any excuse to go looking for that strange creature. And so I spent a whole year, passing by at night, looking for her. One day, we went back to visit her sister. My wife just wanted to pass by during the day. But it was a perfect day, because it was summer, and in that season Mexicali is a pretty hot city, so it was the perfect excuse to travel at night. My wife refused to do it, but I convinced her with the pretext that the car would not be heated. That way, I found myself again with that adrenaline rush I had been looking for. It was around 11 at night when we started to hear the noise. My wife preferred to sleep because she was afraid to look at that lens again, but both my son and I were very alert, looking everywhere looking for that light. In the distance, we saw that in front of us was a trailer. Because of the speed we were driving, little by little we were giving him reach, and being about 200 meters from him, we began to see that he was swinging from one side to the other like in a zigzag in a dangerous way. I made the comment to my son that very surely the driver was falling asleep, or that the wind was shaking him that way, when he finally stabilized and we gave him reach. My son made me the observation that he was carrying something hanging from behind. It looked like a black sheet, and as we got even closer, we saw that it was a person with a kind of tunic like that of the monks. It looked like it was hanging from the stairs behind the trailer. I turned on the high lights of the car to see it better, and we realized that the tunic moved a lot but only from the height of the knees down. The funny thing is that despite the strong airflow, the hood did not go back, but in a moment the airflow raised the tunic. My son and I shouted at the same time, "He has no feet! He has no feet!" With the screams we were making, we woke up my wife, who, when looking at what was happening, scared, begged me to speed up and leave the trailer behind. When I tried to cross it, I put myself next to that thing to see it better, and being on one side of the trailer, that thing turned towards us. It was when we saw some red eyes shining intensely, looking at us fixedly. I had never seen something like that. Two red-hot arms seemed to be on fire. After watching us for almost 5 seconds, he smiled at us with that huge mouth, long and macabre. I'll never forget her. It was such an impression of my son that he jumped to the other side of the seats behind, while my wife reacted with a burst of laughter, screaming terrified. She fell on me, and almost made me lose control of the car. I, to try to stabilize it, released the accelerator. This made us lose speed. It was then that I returned to position myself behind the trailer. To our surprise, that thing was no longer there. He gave us the fear that we would bring him up from the car. My son, afraid, looked up to look for him on the roof, but he was not there. He turned his gaze to the trailer and shouted, warning us that he was there, on the right side of the box, sliding towards the cabin. I accelerated to tell the driver. When I was at his height, I started to poke him and make the change of lights to try to draw his attention, but he did not seem to understand us. I stepped on the accelerator to overtake him and took a prudent distance. Then I changed lanes to be positioned in front of him. Then we started to make signs with our hands. Then we got a terrible scare. When we turned around, we saw that creature was right above the cabin. We thought the driver did see him because he zigzagged aggressively again like in the beginning. We noticed that the trailer was already very close to us and that thing was still up there, clinging to the roof. Without thinking, I stepped on the accelerator deep, managing to leave the trailer far behind. I don't know how long it took, but every time we went up a hill we looked back at the ravines, trying to look where it came from, but we didn't detect any lights or traces. After that moment, we were sorry to have left that driver alone to his fate. After discussing it, we decided to stop for a break to wait for him. There we spent, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, but we never saw it happen. Everything was very strange. The road was very lonely that night and there was almost total silence. With how nervous we were, we preferred to leave. When I got to the next cash register, I was so nervous I couldn't even grab the money. The young woman who was attending to me when she noticed this, asked me if everything was okay. I answered that yes. She insisted that I was very nervous, and she told me that she was curious that a few minutes before, a trailer passed by, whose driver. He also felt quite upset. At that moment I understood that it was perhaps the same trailer that we had left behind. As I left the cassette, I stepped on the accelerator trying to reach it. Surprisingly, later on, in a deviation from the same road, we saw the same trailer parked, but how? We all asked ourselves when we saw it. If we never saw it happen when we waited for it at rest. As we got closer, We noticed that the driver was under the trailer. He seemed to be very nervous and desperately looking for something around the truck. We parked in front of him and got out of the car. Then I approached him. "Good evening, friend. Sorry, I don't know if you know where our car is. You were the one we saw a while ago?" He looked at us with surprise, and after a few moments in silence, he answered me. "Yes, it was me. You were the ones who were peeing, right?" "Yes, it was us." "What was that thing that was hanging from your truck?" We noticed that he was too upset. He constantly rubbed his hands on his face. Then he threw one or two curses in a low voice. I have no idea. When I started to go up the rumor, everything was quiet, but suddenly I started to notice that the trailer was shaking from one side to the other. I thought it was the air that comes down from the mountains. I don't know if you know, but many truckers have been hit by the same thing. I started to take precautions, and to a certain point I tried to stay calm to react in the best way, but then I heard a very hard blow in the box. It seemed to me that something very heavy fell on her. It was a very strong blow, because I lost control of the trailer for a few moments. I thought I was going to kill myself. Thank God I was able to stabilize it. That didn't give me a good spin, so I started looking through the mirrors backwards, but I didn't see anything. Then, I started feeling the trailer very slow, as if the engine was being forced. It seemed as if it was carrying a very heavy load, but out of nowhere, I felt it lighten, so much so that it seemed to move alone. I tried to alert my colleagues on the radio, but there was a lot of static. Besides, the light bulbs went down and went up in intensity on their own. For moments everything returned to normal, but then the same thing happened again. I started to worry, because literally everything was failing. I even thought about stopping, but then I realized that there was a car behind me. It was you. I didn't want to cause an accident. It was then when they started to beep and scream that I was bringing something up. He made a sudden pause, as if to try to catch air. I interrupted him and then I told him everything we saw. I don't know if I did well because it got very bad. So what I saw is true. We tried to make him calm down, but he insisted on continuing to tell us. When you left, I kept trying to shake the trailer and move in zigzag to knock down that thing that I brought upstairs. For a moment I thought they were thieves. I thought I had nothing left, but when I turned to look in the mirror on the left side, there it was. There that person was standing out there. I don't know if he was on the strip or not. The thing is that I clearly saw a shadow, or a being or something. I really don't know how to tell you, because I saw that thing up close. I don't know exactly what it was, but it had a black tunic like the monks, and the worst thing is that I was looking at myself fixedly. Even now they are giving me the same chills I felt that time. His gaze was very deep, like hatred, as if he wanted to hurt me. Seriously, it scared me a lot, because apart they were red, like those of metal to red alive. At that moment I lost control of my faculties. I don't know how many curses I let go. I thought the only thing in my hands was to look ahead and do my best not to lose control of the truck. I turned around after a few seconds, but that thing was no longer outside. Shit. I know you won't believe it, but I was already sitting inside the cabin, in the co-pilot's seat, but I wasn't looking at me. No, I was sitting like nothing. Looking ahead, but with the tunic on. At that moment I could not see his eyes or his face. I, for my part, was in the middle of a nervous breakdown. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, but I could not do that. My body was shaking like crazy. My mind exploded with thoughts such as continuing as if nothing was going on, thinking that maybe that being would disappear out of nowhere. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't finish a damn sentence. I turned around with fear to see that thing. Then I looked at the front. Again, I tried to look at it with a lot of eye, always afraid to see it turning towards me. I wanted it to go, but I didn't know how to do it. They were moments that seemed eternal to me. I didn't even realize how the cabin got to feel frozen. I'm not sure if the temperature dropped suddenly, or if it was gradual. The thing is that even the bones hurt me. I thought again about praying and saying goodbye, but the moaning felt heavy, tense and painful. I even got saliva out of my mouth. Then I didn't know what to do. I got panicked and braked in dry. Then I opened the door and jumped out. As I ran to the front, all scared, I saw that the lights of the trailer were flashing, going up and down its intensity, as if they were going to turn off. I begged not to stay completely dark in that place, but then everything calmed down. The truck lights stabilized, and somehow I stopped feeling that strong pressure on my chest. I felt as if a weight had been lifted off me. Carefully, and still dead from fear, I approached the cabin. I looked inside, and saw that that being was no longer there, but I didn't want to go up. I was still afraid that it could be hidden somewhere. I went through the perimeter of the trailer, and then I felt safer not to see it again. I got on again and drove again. I kept praying. For a moment I felt that everything was my imagination, or that I tried to think to calm myself. From then on I only drove. I drove and prayed not to see that again. I don't know how long it took, but in the distance I saw a light on the road. I felt a little relief when I saw that it was the light from the copper casket. Little by little the temperature returned to normal and... Sorry to interrupt, but we stayed in the break waiting for it and never saw it pass. And it's impossible for it to pass by without seeing it. Please don't tell me that, I think I've had enough. No, sorry friend, we don't want to scare you anymore, it's just that we... In fact, there is a section of the road that I don't remember having traveled. I don't know what happened. I thought it was a mental block or something like that, but now you come and tell me that you didn't see me pass. I don't understand. I don't remember anything until I got to the Cobra's house. That road is hell. We felt that last thing as a blow. So, what happened? Why didn't we see it happen? We didn't want to delve into the subject any further. Poor man, he was in a very bad state. We suggested that he seek help, even we offered to help him as much as we could, but he refused. At the end of the day, we stayed with him a little longer, and once we saw him more calm, we retired, wishing that he would never go through the same thing again. Once in the car, my wife began to recriminate me. To this day I do not forget her words. The one who seeks finds, and you already found it. The rest of the path that was left to reach our destination, we went in complete silence. Now when I travel from Los Angeles to Mexicali, I go out for San Diego. I cross a little the noisy but inside the United States. I try at all costs to avoid meeting that being, or with something even worse. Apart from that, I have gone through more strange things, but I will tell you that on another occasion. They say that the one who looks finds. And I found it.